I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2000. You don't have to go through it alone, and you should not ever.
Right.
You should not ever. If you start talking about the situation,
Right.
people will say, "What can I do?" Or if you say, "You know what, I'm going to have this done, or I need to go to the doctor. Well, let me take you." If you just talk about it, you don't even have to ask for help. We really, we should get up every morning and just kiss the ground and say thank you. Even if you're not a religious person, whatever your beliefs are, every day, the one prayer that we should all be saying is thank you.
So take me back to the day that you decided that it was time to leave corporate America behind and go out on your own as a freelance writer.
Oh my goodness. It was after I had joined a startup. I I ended up in the software industry working for Lotus Development, which at the time Lotus was a major software player. And this was at the time of Windows, when Windows was first being introduced.
Right.
And then Lotus was acquired by IBM. And my very first reaction was, oh no, I can't work for IBM. I never saw myself in a big corporate environment. I
Hmm.
never saw myself in any kind of a big structured organization of any kind.
Mm.
And so my very first reaction was, no, I can't work for IBM. I had that same image that everyone had. They wore the blue suits and
Right.
all of that. I did end up staying with the combined company, and it was a great experience. But I think, I've always been a bit of a wanderer, and I just felt like I wanted to do something different and just wanted to have more freedom and more control. More control, right? That's what we all want, although we realize how elusive that actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would have been, gosh, when was that? That would have been back in the late 90s, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it was just feeling like, yeah, I don't want this corporate thing. I don't want to go up the ladder. I didn't want to manage people.
Right.
That was part of it. And when I was at Lotus, I had a manager who said, you're an individual contributor. You're a strong individual contributor, and that's an important
What was your
role
role
as
there?
well.
What did you do
Well,
there?
I started out at Lotus. I was in kind of a field marketing position.
Well, really quick, because there's probably a lot of people watching that have no idea what Lotus is.
Probably, you're
so,
right.
So take me back. What is Lotus?
Lotus Development was one of the very first personal software companies. When IBM invented the PC and and computing was going to happen at your desk, not on a mainframe where you just had access to some mainframe software.
Right.
Once the PC was introduced and DOS as the operating system, you had to have software on the desktop as well.
Yep.
And the big software applications at that time were, well, I'm going to forget Word. You'll have to help me. Word Perfect. Word Perfect
Right.
for word processing.
Yep.
So every secretary used, that was when there were still secretaries
Yep.
in many offices, though that role has kind of gone away.
Right.
But any type of document creation was done on Word Perfect. In the finance department, spreadsheets, Lotus 123 was the software application. And a little bit on a sideline, there was Harvard Graphics, which was the presentation
Right.
graphics software at the time. And actually, I worked for that company, which was SPC, Software Publishing Corporation. They developed, actually, I think Harvard Graphics might have been an acquisition, but Harvard Graphics was the presentation graphics application.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So these three software programs came from three different companies,
Yep.
and they all ran on DOS. And that
Oh,
was
okay.
that was your desktop. Well, now of course your
It's
desktop.
like the very early version of like Microsoft Office.
Yes.
What it is today.
Yes, exactly. And so that's where Microsoft took over the desktop because they offered the whole package. You didn't have to cobble together
Right.
these software programs.
Yep.
And there was one fourth application, which was Ashton Tate, the database company.
Oh, gosh,
So you had
yes.
Ashton.
D-base.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Right.
You had Ashton Tate for your database. You had Lotus 123 for your spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
You had Word Perfect for word processing,
Right.
and you had Harvard Graphics for presentation graphics.
Yeah.
That is how old I'm getting.
So one thing I'm interested in is I know you as a writer. And so how did you get to working at Lotus in the first place?
Well, I started out in sales. So when I started at SPC, I was in a sales role,
Oh,
and then I kind of transitioned into like a field marketing role. Kind of did a little bit of everything. So field marketing meaning, these like SPC was a Silicon, it was Mountain View headquartered. Lotus was Cambridge. So I was in Chicago. So I was doing field marketing support for the sales teams out of Chicago. And besides writing, my one of my first communications loves, I always say that I'm not a numbers girl, I'm a word girl. I don't know how I got at Lotus. I don't know. Well, when I joined Lotus, Windows was already being developed.
right.
And Lotus actually had a suite that competed with Microsoft for a short time. And then I also joined Lotus when they had developed it was called Groupware, Lotus Notes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That was huge.
It was huge at the time.
Yeah.
And that was a collaborative software platform. It was kind of a document based collaboration program. I mean, now companies would use Slack or, well, I mean,
It
there's
was
really no
so
analogy
huge.
anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a big thing. So, but stepping back, so now I've lost track of what you asked.
Yeah, how
about.
did you
Oh yeah,
yeah,
so
how'd you end
yeah, so
yeah.
really not my writing. Writing was always kind of a side thing. I mean,
Hmm.
my mother would laugh because I would always have, when I was little, I would write little stories. And, she'd find like my little notebook and little stories that I was
Love it.
writing. Yeah. Who knows what they were about?
Little notebooks?
Yeah, like just little stories. Yeah.
Like tell me more.
Oh, I wish I could. I mean, just little details of, like you make up a little story, like David and John were, a really cool father and son team, and they went on a trip. I mean, just
Yeah, I
little,
know.
yeah,
I have a couple that I made featuring like my brother or my sister, stuff like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So just a little story. And then, of course, they might have involved like, my friends or my cousins. I grew up in North Dakota, and uh, we spent a lot of time with aunts and uncles and cousins, so it probably
Right.
involved that, or going to their farms, feeding the hens, feeding the pigs. Who knows what they were about. So writing was always more of a side thing. But what I really excelled at and did well at was presentations. So public speaking and doing presentations. So I did a lot of seminars, where we'd get the hotel room,
Right.
the ballroom.
Yes.
If it's Tuesday, it must be Cleveland, one of those things. I felt so envious of my colleagues. Now, this was when I was it started at SPC,
Right.
Software Publishing, where my colleague out of San Francisco, she got to go to San Francisco and LA and Honolulu. And then, my colleague on the East Coast got to go to all these cool East Coast cities.
Yep.
Right.
And I'm in the Midwest, so I get to go to Chicago. I love Chicago. And I don't want to denigrate any of these cities, but Toledo just can't hold a torch to, LA or
Right.
New York.
I don't think there's too many people that are probably going to disagree.
Even those that are in Toledo. Right.
Even those who live in
Right.
Toledo.
Right.
Yeah, so it was literally, if it's Tuesday, it must be Toledo. I mean, at the time, I had a brother-in-law who was a pilot for United, and I clocked more miles than he did. He was limited,
Wow.
because they couldn't, well, I was like a consultant, that gets on the road every week.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's just dawning on me. I now remember meeting you when you were at Lotus or IBM at the time. I can't remember. And there was the Ami Pro was coming out,
Yes.
which was their equivalent.
Their word,
right?
their word.
Word.
Mhm.
And Todd Dombrowski
Mhm.
was one of the presenters.
Mhm.
Todd ended up working for me for quite a while.
Mhm.
And so that's just now I'm connecting the points. You were one of the
All the
people that were up
dots.
there
Yeah.
presenting. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
like at
so
150 North Michigan Avenue or something like
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
I mean, I think the biggest ones that I remember doing, we were at a big like a Hyatt or a Hilton by the airport by O'Hare,
Okay.
and there were well over 500 people. And so I would get up and do the presentations
Mhm.
in front of these big groups, loved it.
Yep.
And then I sometimes went in to support the sales teams if it was a big client. So I remember, for example, Monsanto in St. Louis as, an example where they were doing a competitive
Sure.
comparison. And so I would go in and do those presentations as well. The most fun one we did we did Comdex, but the most fun show that I remember was one in New York City. It was at the
Right.
Javits Center.
Yes.
And what we did was we hired an actor and we did kind of an improv thing where the actor would come out. We took turns with me. It was me and some of my colleagues. So the premise, the setting was that we were creating a presentation. We had a huge presentation sales pitch the next day, and we were pulling our hair out because we still weren't done with the presentation.
Yep.
We were getting it together.
Oh, it's real.
Yeah.
Real life.
Yeah, and so
exactly.
so the actor would come out, and he came out as these different characters to kind of help us. So first he was I remember him being John Wayne. He did a really good John Wayne, and I don't remember the other. And I think there were two other characters. So we'd be working, and it'd be like, oh no, I don't know how to do this. And then he'd come out as John Wayne. Well, little girl, let me help you find
Oh
that.
my God.
This was like 20 years ago, easily. Yeah.
Right.
But that was at the Javits Center.
Yeah.
That was so much fun. So much fun.
What
So I
about it-
started
what about
presentations.
it made that so much fun?
I guess it's the ham in me. It was just being up in front of an audience. It was interacting with the actor. I
I'm
think it
sitting
was
next
the
to
actor.
another one of those.
Yeah. I think it was the actor. He was great. He was like whatever. He did commercials, he did local stage stuff.
Yep.
Actor for hire.
It was that energy.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And the interaction.
Yep.
Hmm.
So what I'm hearing is, I wonder, you've mentioned things like you wanted to like spend time like with people, you wanted to like the interactions were really big. And I remember at the start of this, you mentioned you don't want to work for IBM. And I wanted to ask what specifically about that really drove you to instantly have that almost like visceral reaction to like, I don't want to do it. And it sounds like it's something like, hey, if I work in like corporate America like this, I'll lose some of this other stuff, like this more intimate like relationships with different people and that kind of stuff. Is that part of why you didn't want to go so badly?
I think it was more of it. It might have been some of that, but honestly, the larger the organization, the narrower they put you into a slot. And this is one of the reasons that I loved SPC. It was a smaller company, so we could do a little bit more. We could improvise a little bit more. There wasn't like, oh no, you don't do that. That's Joe's role.
Right.
Where now, when you start into a company the size of IBM, they have much more rigid organization support. First of all,
Right.
I mean, tons of people supporting
You must do this
Yeah,
specific
this is
role,
what
and
you
if you
do.
don't
Right.
do that.
Yeah.
Well,
You'll be
I-
measured.
That's kind of all you do. And that's why I actually love the startup as well, because then you're building it, you're all pitching in, you're all doing a little bit of everything. And that works to a certain point. I mean, finally you have to bring in, people that really know particular
Sure.
aspects of whatever it is. But
Right.
I enjoy just the building things, making it up as you go.
Yeah. Okay. So you were, when we took you down this long corridor away from my original question about the day that you made the decision to go off on your own as a freelancer,
I'm
we
glad you
talked about
finally brought it back.
Yeah,
That's
so-
important.
right,
It was
so-
a little
yeah, 30 minutes later. So, but after Lotus, you said there was one stop on the way, and that's where you met a mutual friend. That's how we got connected. So
Well, I had known, are you talking about
yeah, Rob.
Yeah. Well, I had known Rob when he worked for the
For
training company,
Productivity Point. Right.
Yes.
That's how I know Rob.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So we had interacted that, and that's how I knew Rob. So what happened was, after I became part of IBM, I joined I was in the IBM was structured around what they, at the time, what they called ISUs, which were industry specific units. And I was in the manufacturing ISU.
Okay.
And I actually reported to a woman in Cambridge. I had opportunities to relocate to Cambridge, actually,
Okay.
which is where Lotus was headquartered, but I didn't want to go there. But I was reporting to the marketing organization,
Right.
and we were doing a show, I want to say in Raleigh, somewhere in I think it was in Raleigh, maybe Washington, D.C., and
Mhm.
Virginia, somewhere in that part of the country. And I met a gentleman who's French, and he was looking to start a company that was. It's funny to talk. We were talking about how computing moved from mainframe to the desktop. Well, then, so now, fast forward 20 years, and now it's computing, like realizing, like, oh, we have these disjointed desktops. Let's get a little more centralization again.
Right.
And he wanted to bring a Cisco like concept where it would be thin computing,
Okay.
thin client computing. But this was also the early days of the internet. And so he had an idea to do a suite of business applications that he called Biz at Large. And it was just it was thin client. So there wasn't there was no software that sat on your desktop.
Right.
It was all, internet based. So it was the early days of, kind of internet
Like
computing.
a SaaS application.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very early days.
And in fact, I remember because we went to Comdex, and one of the marketing pieces we had a graphic designer design a CD case. Remember, software used to come on a CD.
Oh,
You may
yeah.
not remember.
Oh,
We
I
definitely
definitely
do.
remember.
Right.
Oh, I've burned hundreds of CDs.
Yeah, yeah. So, software came on a CD.
Right.
So we actually had the designer create a CD, it looked like a CD case, and it was Biz at Large. And it had all the benefits. So instead of songs, this one we kind of made it look more like a music CD.
Right.
But we had the benefits about you no longer have to, download your software, from no more CDs.
Right.
And then on the back, we put all of these, like benefits, like, no more distributing CDs, and you don't
Right.
need a big expensive computer on every desktop, and whatever
Right.
they were anymore.
Yeah. I remember the first ads that Salesforce used
Mm-hmm.
was this. It was a red blob and it says no software.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
It was the whole idea. No software.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And then he ended up changing the name of the company to ASP1. And ASP was an acronym that never really took off, but it was for application service provider.
Mm.
So then, because he decided that what he wanted to do was the provisioning of software.
Okay.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And so and then ASP1 ended up being acquired by another company called Aptix. And Aptix is now something else. And
Sure.
and in fact, it's got European roots again. But I went ahead and I was the director of marketing, VP of marketing. So it was a lot of fun. But and it was fun, but then it was really tough. It was really tough getting traction and getting started. That was the heyday of, we hired all these people and all these software developers, and then we ended up having to let many of them go, and we had to downsize. And then
Yep.
I ended up that's when I decided, really, I'm going to go do my own thing. I can do this. I know I can do, because I was doing so much.
Right.
Yep.
Because when you were with a
But
startup,
how did you decide that writing was it? Because you mentioned you've done sales,
Mhm.
you've done public speaking, and you loved that.
hmm
How did you choose writing?
Well, I don't know that I chose it. It just I just ended up doing a lot of it. I was able to
Interesting.
do it. I guess I was effective at it. And so it just ended up happening that way.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
How-
Because think about it. For B2B marketing, I've always been in the world of B2B sales, B2B marketing.
Right.
And it's a lot of, especially back then, we printed so much stuff. I mean, now, of course, everything is online, but we used to print so many brochures and sales support sheets and all kinds of things, and they all needed writing.
Mhm.
And especially when you're in a startup, you have limited funds to hire someone.
Yeah.
So you end up doing a lot of the work yourself. So I think I just kind of
How did you get
fell
your
into it.
jobs then?
Well, through word of mouth. So I met Henri at this show, and I was an IBM employee, and I certainly didn't say anything, but we started talking, and
Okay.
then we got in touch, and I mean, he was hoping to do some business with IBM, getting some support, and
Sure.
so it just happened that way.
And
I
then,
mean, that's how a lot of people get their jobs, right? Just
so I have to get,
It's true.
mm-hmm,
so I'm curious how you got to working for LAC Group, which
mm-hmm,
is where Rob was at.
mm-hmm.
That's how I met you,
Yeah,
truly met you.
yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, so I was doing freelance work, and I reached out to Rob. I don't know if I had somehow, through LinkedIn, probably reconnected with him.
Right.
And I'm not sure, I might have gone to his website and to the LAC group. And this was the early days of LAC group,
Right.
and went to the website, which, man, he had been doing some blogging, and I just said, do you need any writing support? I mean, that's an easy entree. And also at that time, because again, when I was at ASP1, and as we hired people, I did end up having to manage people again.
Right.
And that's when I remembered, like, oh yeah, I don't want to manage people. I really don't. Not that I dislike it, it just
Right.
doesn't.
Now, there's another story here that I have to interject, and I've brought this up to you before because Rob brought me in to be factional CMO,
Mhm.
right? And he said, everything's fair game except you're going to have to meet Cate. And Cate does my personal blogging for me. And so I remember reaching out to you first time, phone call, and I said something about working on Friday. And you said, no, 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 I don't work on Fridays. I ski on Fridays because you were living
Up in
up in
Dillon.
Breck at
Mhm.
that time, right?
Mhm.
So, anyway, to kind of walk us through that little bit of adventure with Rob Correo and LAC Group, and just what are your memories of that and doing contract writing for them?
Well, there was a little step in between where when I was off doing my own thing, and that was fine. And, I was able to, do some marketing freelance projects,
Right.
really using my network, and, but also at the time I was still living in Chicago. So this was the early aughts, the early 2000s.
Hmm.
And I had gone back to school, graduate school. I always resisted getting an MBA. Yeah, that was another thing. My whole life has been like a battle between kind of doing more creative, free style, freelance stuff, and, business. And every time I went to an MBA program, and I was like, oh, I
It
really,
felt
no,
like IBM.
this just doesn't call to me at all. But of course, everyone was getting an MBA. And if you wanted to get ahead in business, I mean, that was kind of a requirement. So,
Not anymore, by the way.
yeah, not anymore now. It's thankfully. So, yeah. So it was just like, I want to get out of the business world. I want to do something more creative. So my sister and I actually started a little business. She's a very good seamstress, and I created these little stories. We had a series of little characters. They were like, we had Lola Ladybug, Thaddeus Turtle.
Oh my gosh.
We had a butterfly, Beatrice Butterfly. There were like 4 or 5 of them, and we just made little stories about them.
Oh, fun.
And then I did the sketching for all of them, and then she made these little
Oh my gosh.
They were little pillows that with a pocket. So the tiny little story, because they were very short little
Mhm.
stories, could go into the little pocket. And we did that for a while, and we never, honestly, that was, looking back at that, I wish we had either given it more time, gotten some outside help.
Etsy didn't exist back then.
I'm sorry.
Etsy wasn't.
Oh yeah,
around.
no Etsy.
Yeah,
So
that
we
would have
did.
been your
Yeah,
savior.
yeah, exactly. That really
Right.
would have. And what we did was a lot of trade shows we did like craft shows.
Right.
So that's really was really the biggest part of our sales.
Yeah.
Like in Denver, for example. Now at this point I had moved to Colorado because she was here and I decided to, yeah, I want to be in Colorado. I love skiing, I love the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And so for example, I don't know if it's I think it still goes on. There's a big Christmas show at the convention center. It's open to the public, and anyone who makes anything could go in and, get a booth. So, we did things like that.
Oh my
And
God.
we did okay. We did pretty well. I mean, we kind of broke even at the end of the day, but we never turned it never turned into a business. We never turned it into one. In retrospect, if we were really serious, and I don't think she was into it that much either in
Okay.
terms of actually turning it into a business.
Right.
We would have tried to network more closely with like buyers of children's goods, that kind of thing. We did go to a couple of small gift shops and we were able to get, product in there, but it didn't, we didn't really support it. It wasn't, immediately successful
Right.
in a way that encouraged us.
You never know. Shark Tank could have been your savior too,
Ah,
right?
who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows?
With
I
your
mean,
presentation skills, you
yeah.
probably would have wowed them.
Who knows, But one thing that I've learned is it's one thing to have ideas, and it's a whole other thing to bring them to life. And then it's yet a whole other thing to keep that life going and to sustain it and to grow it.
Mhm.
What do you mean by keep the life going?
It's very easy to so we had this idea for we called them IMI kids. So we had the idea for the little stories and the little pillows and all of that. Then we actually made them. We got them made.
Right.
And then we actually went to some shows. We sold them. It was a tangible physical thing. So we got that step 2, right?
Mhm.
The idea came to life, but we didn't sustain it. We didn't think about, okay, what do we do now? Well, what's next? We didn't really have a plan.
Mhm.
We just kind of, went into it. And some other things happened and it just all kind of, well, we deserted it. Quite frankly, we deserted it.
When you say make a plan, what do you mean by that? Because I know a lot of people are going to think about the stereotypical, I need like a whole like 20-page business plan, put all this stuff together. And it doesn't sound like that's exactly what you're talking about. What do you mean by like have a plan put together for this?
Yeah, I don't think you need 20 pages. I guess it depends on I think it starts with a vision.
Mhm.
So you should have some idea. I mean, you could get started and say, let's just see where this goes.
Mhm.
But I think that's too hard. And even especially now, because yes, now you have many more routes to market. You have many more resources. You don't need to hire anybody. You go to Fiverr, you go to, right? You go to any online service, you go to Etsy to sell, but there's so much. So how do you break through? So you have to have a vision and then a plan, yeah, because otherwise the vision just stays a vision. So the plan might be 1 page. It might be 3 bullet points. I don't know what it is. It depends on what you want to do with it. But yes, you need a plan. And no, you don't need an MBA, 25-page,
Mhm.
document with accompanying slides.
Right.
Well, I don't know. Maybe you do if you're trying to build, I don't know, Facebook or something. But you do need a plan. You need some kind of a written roadmap. Okay, here's where we're going to get started. Here's the steps we're going to take. Here's what we're going to do. Here are the benchmarks. If we hit these benchmarks, okay, then we'll go on to this. If we don't hit the benchmarks,
Right.
what do we do? Just some kind of a working document.
So it was your sister and you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you, after it was over, did you ever look back and say, in fact, you said we'd given it more time, but have you ever had time to reflect on it and say, we actually had something there?
Well, it's funny that we did have that conversation. And again, I think it was more my dream than hers, honestly.
Mhm.
That was part of it. So if you're going to have any kind of a partner, you have to both be in it,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't think I think she thought it was kind of a fun thing. She never worked in the business world. She got married she was a teacher.
Okay.
She taught for 1 year. She married, her husband was in the Air Force. she became a housewife. She had kids. She didn't work really.
Right. Right.
So I don't think it just not wasn't her thing.
So you went into it thinking this is a mutual thing, 50-50, but really from a vision and passion standpoint, you had the majority of the burden on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the thought that you have there is that you both better be on the same page with where this is going to go.
Yeah, and I think that's true in any relationship, right? You know, you have to you have to be together
Right.
if you're going to stay together. But certainly for any kind of a business, even if it's a small business, it's not like you know, again, it's not like we were trying to build anything major. But maybe, and again, that's where part of the planning is. Well, gosh, do we want Mattel to buy this? Do we want this to be
Right.
a big
The
thing?
next Furby.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
So
exactly.
the desire and lesson of I want to make sure that there's a plan. It feels like it's much more of a less of yes, we're going to do this at this point, and this at this point, and these are the metrics, and etc. And much more of a here's a compass so that we can both agree what is north and what is south.
Yeah, I think a roadmap, a compass, a roadmap. We're willing to have some side trips. We're willing to take the
Yeah,
scene.
no journey's fun doing this.
Yeah.
It's the water slide that makes it fun.
Yeah, exactly. But that said, I think if you are serious about building something,
Mhm.
you have to have some kind of a plan.
Yeah.
Have you been in Colorado? This is a shout out to everyone in Colorado to, and now I won't be able to, Bishop's Castle.
I've not, no.
You got to go. It's in I think the San Juan Mountains. It's south of, if you go south out of Colorado Springs and then head west, it's a guy who owned this land, and I don't even know the full story, but he started building this kind of whimsical, it is a castle looking, it looks like something out of, King Arthur. And now it's a tourist site. You can go tour it and go into it.
Oh, fun.
Not a castle like, it's not the
Doesn't have a
sturdiest.
drawbridge.
Yeah, exactly. Not the
Okay.
sturdiest of castles. Although when I was there, and it's been many years,
Yeah.
I think he was actually building like a moat, and he did want a bit of a drawbridge. But here's a guy who was just a dreamer, and he was a builder, and he just started building this. And
Yep.
I don't know if he even thought about where it was going to go.
Fascinating.
So yeah, I mean, I think you could build something and just say, hey, let's see where this takes us. But I think if you have some vision, well, first the vision, okay, that's the idea, that's the
Mhm.
vision. But then some kind of compass, roadmap, plan,
Mm-hmm.
a mind map, just
Right.
just
Yeah. Love
something.
mind maps.
Yeah, just something tangible
Yeah.
where you're like, oh yeah, yeah. Okay, let's do this. Let's get started this way.
Yep.
So you grew up in North Dakota.
North Dakota,
North
small
Dakota.
town in Park River, North Dakota.
Right. And that was on a farm, or was that not?
Well, we never lived on a farm directly. So my father grew up on a farm. One of his brothers took over the family farm.
Okay.
My mother grew up on a farm. But we never lived. And then I had aunts and uncles who also farmed. And and these were small family farm. I mean, they were nothing
Sure.
major. But that's another business that has really changed. Now it's
Oh yeah.
it's become corporate. Like there aren't too many small family farms anymore.
Yep.
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town.
So I'm wondering what lessons you learned in a very different society than most people have grown up in,
Mhm.
right? And a time and place that probably doesn't exist too much anymore. And what lessons did you learn that you applied through your career as you look back? Like, oh wow, I learned that when,
That's interesting. I don't know. I don't know that I ever thought about it. Now it might have been that it was just part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And my friends to this day will joke about that's the North Dakota girl in you. Because I'm a bit of a do it. I can do it. I can do that.
right,
Even when there's some things like some of the graphic design stuff, well, yeah, I could do that.
right,
So even when there's some things that, okay, no, it's fine. Yes, sometimes you got to bring in a professional. But I have this, you can, do it yourself. You can do it. So that probably came out of again, a small farm, small town, You got to figure things out, for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to pick up a phone and call someone to come in,
Right.
to
It might be
take care.
200 miles away, right? Yeah.
Or not even an option.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe just that, oh, I can do this.
But what was one of the biggest changes you felt when you went from, you know, basically been on a farm all the way to now you're in the city?
Well, and I did literally do that. I moved to Chicago, and to further, and I'm sure I've never told you this, but I wanted to do something creative. And so I decided I wanted to be an interior designer. So I went to a school that's not even, I don't think it's, I'm sure it's not open anymore. It was like a little design, it was called Harrington Institute of Interior Design, right on Michigan Avenue. Cool building, cool old building, the Fine Arts building.
Okay.
And there's a little theater in that building, and and the school was small. I don't think we took, I know we didn't take more than one floor, and all the other tenants were, architects and designers and creative people. And it was a funky, beautiful old building. In fact, at the time, it had an elevator person.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't even have an automatic elevator.
Yeah.
You'd get in and you'd tell the guy, yeah, I need to go to the fourth floor. Had these beautiful big windows that overlooked Lake Michigan. And honestly, I should have stayed in a creative field. But I think I decided, I'm going to get this little interior design certification, but I don't know. I was kind of scared. I was like, I don't know if I can make a living doing this, and this is too narrow.
Well, you said you should have stayed.
Well, looking back at it now, yeah. Not that I'm dying to be an interior designer anymore, but I think I wished I had really committed to that path, at least a little bit longer.
Yeah, but what makes you feel that way?
What makes me feel that way now?
Yeah. What changed?
If I think about who I am and what my strengths are, I think it is kind of on a creative side, whether it's with words or images or putting things together.
Right.
So I don't know that there was like an epiphany or anything that happened.
Well, what was the reason you decided not to? Because you said you were scared to. What was making you scared?
Well,
about
I
it?
felt at that time, I did, I moved from a town of a couple thousand people to Chicago, and I wasn't getting a lot of financial support from my parents, and I just felt like I have to be able to take care of myself.
I'm kind of seeing you like Mary Tyler Moore on the MT. For those of you old enough, there's a great show. I'm sure it's in reruns somewhere,
Yes,
right?
I'm sure.
And she's walking down the streets of Minneapolis, as I remember, and she's flinging her purse around, and everything's great. And she has is it a roommate or a friend, Rhoda, right?
Rhoda lived in the building.
Right, right.
She had this cute little apartment.
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, the man who was the doorman, this is a funny story, who you never saw, but he was on the speaker that she would talk to. That was Lorenzo Music, and I actually shared a cab with him one night.
Oh.
And I had no idea who he was until I got out of the car, and he's like, "Oh, I've done that. Oh, I missed that opportunity." But I'm fascinated that it seems that there's a couple of things that you pointed out where you've had this opportunity, and then it seems like you questioned yourself a little bit.
Oh, I did, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, I just felt like I don't know if I could do this. I don't know if I could continue on and, support myself and, finish the school. And I think it was a 3-year program. And I thought, what if interior design is kind of a fluffy thing? What if I can't get a job? So I just felt like, I think I need to do something that is more marketable. Yeah. And so right next door to Harrington was Roosevelt University, which is an urban college in Chicago.
Right.
It's famous for the auditorium theater. It's a Lewis
University?
No. The architect, Louis Sullivan, designed that building. So it's a significant building. It's probably on the Register of National Historic Places.
Right.
And I ended up getting a scholarship and got a degree in speech communications, which essentially was, kind of not so much marketing. It was kind of marketing, communication, speech. That's where I started speaking and writing. And in fact, it was one of my professors who said, well, you should consider going into sales. Because I realized, I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you're getting a bigger degree, but it's kind of ethereal. Like it's not
Right.
like you're not like getting an accounting degree, and then you become an
Yeah.
accountant.
Yeah.
So she said, you should consider going into sales. So that's what got me on that path.
Fascinating.
So if I gave you a time machine right now, okay, I like that expression, and you went inside of it and you can punch in that date for when you made the decision saying I can't do interior design, and you see younger you sitting down about to make the decision, and older you comes out of that time machine, what would you say as soon as you get out to younger Cate so that she would continue down that path?
Yeah. I would say you can do it. You are capable and you will find the way. And you will find the way. And I remember so distinctly my class was almost all women. There might have been one or two men. And most of them, as far as I could tell, were, pretty fine. I mean, one of my classmates who I became really good friends with, she grew up in Lake Forest, which is a very well-to-do suburb of Chicago.
Right.
So, she didn't have to worry about money. I did have another friend who was also from the Midwest. She was from Indiana. And, she worked. I got a job too. And so I would say to that person, the young Cate, you can do it. You can. You're young, you're resourceful, you're bright. You will make it happen. You will figure it out. Things will fall into place one way or another.
What?
So if I'm young Cate and we're role playing, right? You mentioned improv, right? So we did a little bit of
Okay, do
improv,
your improv.
right? And I'm looking at you, and I'm like, I'm looking at my bank account right now, and if I do this and things don't pan out in like 2 months, this is going to be exceptionally uncomfortable, and I have an opportunity to go do this, and it's not going to be as fun, but at least I won't have to worry about this. How would you respond if she came back to you like that?
Again, I would say, yeah, it's scary, but you're not going to be homeless. You do have resources. You're going to call dad, mom and dad, I'm not going to be out on the street. And I think we all have to remember really what is the downside? How much can we how much exposure do we have? What resources can we tap into? Yeah, I'm not rich. My parents don't live in Lake Forest, but I'm not going to be out on the street. It's not going to be so dire. I think we tend to go to it's human nature to go to the very worst possible place,
Yeah.
the very worst possible place. And I think that's just our reptilian brain, right? Trying to protect us. And we have to shut that reptilian brain down a little bit.
Yeah. So I I want to I mentioned before, right? We love jumping all over the place. And you mentioned that as humans, we tend to jump straight for what is the worst thing that can happen.
The
And we think that
catastrophe.
is what is going to happen.
Hmm.
And you've had the experience that a lot of other people haven't had, where you have had what many people would consider to be one of the worst things that can happen. And can you take me back to the day where you basically found out that you had cancer? What a lot of people watching probably think in the back of their head, like that's like the worst that can happen.
Hmm. Okay, so let's bring up the cancer story. So, just so people know, I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2000. Now, about that, I had lost a sister. She was diagnosed in her, we don't really know, and now we don't have the ability to get the number, but
Right.
she was diagnosed in her mid 30s, so she was diagnosed young,
Young.
and she died at 39. And I remember so distinctly being with her at 39 when she died and thinking, well, she took this bullet. I and I remember I have two sisters. Well, I had three sisters, so that Carol died. My other two sisters, I remember saying to them, "Well, Carol took this bullet," because I thought, no, cancer's not going to happen again in the same family. So, well, that was a lesson hard learned because so that was in '89, and in 2000, I was diagnosed. I was 39 when I was diagnosed. She was 39 when she died.
Wow.
So when I found out in 2000, and I had a lump in my breast, and I found it. My first mammogram, and it was kind of a diffuse lump. It wasn't a typical lump. Usually a tumor, well, and I shouldn't say this because I don't know, but most often tumors are very defined.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of rigid, they're firm. This was more of a mass than a tumor.
Yeah.
And my first mammogram actually came back negative. So even my diagnosis was kind of crazy. But and
And you were here in Colorado at the time?
no, I was in Chicago.
You were in Chicago.
I was in
Okay.
Chicago, yeah.
Right.
Actually, what ended up really getting to the cancer was, at the time I was taking flying lessons, and I was at the
Flying lessons.
flying lessons. Yep.
Oh, like to be a pilot?
Just general aviation.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. And well, I was kind of doing it for a guy that I was seeing at the time, and it's not, again, it's one of those things that's like, yeah, it's not something that I really like. Oh my God, I want to be a pilot. But what happened was I was getting close to do my solo flight, and you have to do a physical, and the FAA doctor found swollen lymph nodes in my neck, and he had asked me if I had been sick, like had a cold or flu or anything, and he said, well, I can't give you this until they clear. You need to go to your regular doctor and let's just make sure. He said, I'm sure it's nothing. And then there were some other things going on. Don't want to get into a lot of detail, but that's really how the breast cancer diagnosis came about.
Okay.
So that was in 2000, and I had a mastectomy, went on a drug regimen, and you know just thought, okay, this is fine. I'll put it behind me, and
Because you were in remission, right?
oh yeah, yep. So it was it ended up being what would be like a stage 2, because I did have a couple of positive lymph nodes. And I think part of it was uh, breast cancer in particular, but cancer is so hard because it can be detected super early. You can have cancer cells that never develop into anything. You probably have cancer cells in your body. Most, cancer cells are just cells that have gone awry, essentially. And oftentimes, immune systems take care of it and it doesn't develop into anything. Well, or it can develop into a disease. So, what ended up happening was, because we were kind of going in circles, and the first mammogram was negative, and, you know, it just took a little more time. So, they discovered when they did the mastectomy that I did have a couple of positive lymph nodes under my arm. So, that turned into kind of a stage 2. I don't remember the exact staging, but I did chemotherapy. And I remember they were, at the time, so this was back in 2000, a suggestion that I should maybe do radiation as well. I got a second opinion at a different hospital, and it was kind of you know,
Yeah.
could do it or not. There was no strong recommendation
Yeah.
to do it. And I thought, I want to do the least amount of damage as possible, to my body. And chemo, it treats your entire body, whereas radiation focuses just on a specific section.
Yeah.
So I went into chemo, and then I was able to take a drug called tamoxifen, because my cancer, like many breast cancers, are hormone driven, and so I was able to go on tamoxifen, which is a 5-year course, and then I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with this, and I was fine, and the cancer hadn't come back. And I remember at one point my oncologist saying, "You're starting to get boring." Because there was nothing going on. I'm like, yay, that's what every cancer patient wants to hear.
Right.
You're getting boring. But what ended up happening was I had a recurrence in 2007. So 7 years after the initial diagnosis, and I found it myself, a tiny little lump in the incision line of my mastectomy. And so went to, check it out, and sure enough, there was cancer there. And they think what happened, and so in retrospect, I probably should have had the radiation, because the radiation might have just, nuked all those cells.
Mhm.
So I did end up having radiation in 2007.
Okay.
And at that time I was living in Colorado. I was living up in the mountains. and I had to drive to Edwards, Colorado, which was probably about a 45-minute drive from where I lived, but a beautiful drive.
Mm-hmm.
Literally driving through the mountains.
Yeah.
And thankfully, it was in the summer, so I didn't have
Yeah.
to worry about,
Chains on your.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I really want to think about that. I'm getting called to come into the office, but I'm like, oh, hold on, I got to put chains on my car. and-
Exactly. Yeah, and so that was 2007, and then it was recommended that I have my ovaries removed
Okay.
because again, my cancer was hormone driven, and many breast cancers are. But I didn't want to do that either. That seemed kind of drastic at the time. And so I didn't do that. And anyway, what ended up happening was in 2016, I always get to this, they say in cancer, if you make it to 5 years, that's a great milestone. If you make it to 10 years, okay, now that's really a good milestone. So from 2007, I had radiation to 2016, almost 10 years. But that summer, I started to feel two things happen. I developed this hacking cough,
Mhm.
just like a persistent, not, I wasn't just a dry, irritated kind of a hacking cough.
Right.
And my regular doctor thought that maybe it was acid reflux, because that's a common symptom of acid
Yeah.
reflux.
Mm-hmm.
And then what also happened though was I just got really tired. Physical activities that I used to be able to do, I just couldn't do anymore. So for example, I might be able to, was in the summer, a bike ride that I could take from Dillon to Breckenridge. No, without any problems. I couldn't do it. I couldn't finish it.
And
I
that's
just,
like 80 miles or.
oh no, no, it was maybe, no, just like a regular ride. But yeah, I couldn't even do, it was like maybe, I don't know, 50, are they 15 miles apart? So something that I used to do easily. I'm
Right.
like, oh my gosh,
Just so you know, easily out here is very different than easily in Illinois. Because easily out here means you are going up and down the mountains. So anyway, your quads just kill you through this. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and this was fine. But the point is that, okay, there's something wrong because all of a sudden I wasn't doing it. It wasn't an 80-mile. It's not like I was going out doing the Courage Classic. I wasn't riding over Vale Pass or anything.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, there's definitely something wrong. And then also what happened is I started to lose weight. And I wasn't changing. I wasn't trying to lose weight.
Right.
So my eating habits were the same.
Mhm.
My exercise habits were the same. And I came to learn that if you are experiencing weight loss, and you're not trying to lose weight, and you're not doing anything, it could be a symptom of something. It's something to pay attention to.
So that's a lesson right
Yeah,
there.
yeah, and
Yeah.
honestly, and especially for women, although men probably too, everyone likes to lose weight, right? And jeans that used to be tight, these just really fit now. So you don't think about losing weight as a problem ever.
So it really masked what was going on.
Yeah. And so, but finally with this hacking cough, my doctor had me see a pulmonologist, and it turns out I had fluid on my lung, in the pleural lining, and that's the reason I was coughing, and that's the reason I was so tired, because I would get winded, and they ended up draining close to 2 liters.
Wow.
Yeah, which is, you think,
That's
oh my
a
gosh.
lot.
Yeah, think of a 2-liter bottle of Coke.
Yeah. It's a lot of weight
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of remarkable. So it was close to 2 liters.
That must have been shocking when you heard that number.
Yeah. No, it was. And the good news is that, when they said, okay, but the fluid is clear, because sometimes when they drain that fluid, it's cloudy. There might be blood, there's other things. But they thought, whatever, there's some irritation. Well, and of course, they knew my cancer history, but that had been several years. But at any rate, so they biopsied it and discovered cancer. So that was when I discovered that I had cancer had come back and it had metastasized. So it moved away from my breast into my lung. And then when they did a scan, they found a little bit in my lower spine as well.
And that's the time you and I were working together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really curious how you made the decision, because there was a decision that you were making of whether or not you were going to tell anybody and to what extent you were. So I knew you were basically reporting to me. So you had to tell me. And then separately, you had to tell Rob, who was the president of the company.
But
But then,
also, I mean, both friends.
yes, both friends. But then you decided to do something bigger than that, as I remember. You wanted to tell everybody in the company. Do you remember that? Yeah,
No.
you made an announcement of like on whatever it was. It wasn't called Slack back then, whatever we were using. And you made an announcement. You said, I have cancer.
No, isn't that interesting? I certainly remember telling the marketing team,
Right.
but I don't remember making it bigger than that.
Oh, yeah, you did.
Gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. You said, I don't want to hide this,
Yeah.
which I thought was very brave.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a
You don't remember your bravery.
No, well, honestly, and then I call it chemo brain anymore. Um, those are the kinds of things. I mean, it's always a balancing act. I mean, I do talk openly about it. A lot of cancer patients do not want to talk about it at all, and that's acceptable. You know, just with anything in life, every person has to make their own decisions about how they want to handle it.
Mhm.
It's not that I want to wear it on my sleeve or anything, but honestly, it's become a lot. I mean, it's a part of it's a part of me, just as
Sure.
my eye color and my height, and I just feel like it's
Right.
at this point, it's that much of a part of me.
Well, we have a friend that I've talked with you about that is doesn't want to talk about it at all,
Hmm.
right? And I'm curious what you would tell her, because her situation is not good.
Right?
But she's made a decision, apparently, that she doesn't want anybody to know, or she doesn't want to share those inner thoughts. What would you say to that person?
I would say to that person that you're already carrying a heavy, heavy burden. And I know her, she's also a stage 4.
Mhm.
So, not that I want to diminish other cancer experiences. I'll tell you, anyone that hears those words for the first time, you have cancer, it is a socket, it is a punch in the gut. It's a punch in the gut. That's exactly how it feels. And thankfully for most people, particularly if the diagnosis is early enough, and now cancer treatments are so sophisticated and there's so many options for treating cancer. So the sooner it gets diagnosed, the better. And and you'll be treated, and for most people, you will put it behind you.
Mhm.
It'll be done, you'll move on, you'll put it behind you. But when it's an advanced case of cancer, stage 3 or stage 4, where it's moved into your lymph nodes, it's moved to another part of your body, now we're talking just, it's common sense. Now I've got to treat something that's moving around. And cancer cells are oh, they're so sophisticated. They change, they mutate. They know. They're like, "Oh, I'm on to you, chemotherapy version number 1.
Really?
You're not going to kill me anymore." They adapt, they mutate. I mean, in some cases,
Mhm.
within advanced cases. So back to the young woman,
Right.
and it's a tragic story. And this is another thing that I hate. And and I know because I was diagnosed at 39. I lost a sister when she was 39,
Yeah.
and breast cancer is happening more and more in younger people. Another cancer that's happening more and more in younger people is colorectal cancer, and
What is colorectal cancer?
well, it's in your colorectal system. So
Oh.
and so they used to say that you needed to start, getting testing for that. I don't know, in your 40s, 50s.
Yeah,
Now,
50.
I mean, now more and more adults, cancer used to be really a disease of the age of aging, and now more and more people in their 30s, 40s, even breast cancer,
Mhm.
late 20s. It's
Right.
it's sad
Yeah.
that it's happening more. So what I would tell anyone is, yeah, you don't need to go, you know, wearing it, I have cancer. but it's such a burden. Why would you want to bear that by yourself?
Right.
Why would you want to put yourself through that when you can get a support system, your family, your friends, and if you don't have a strong natural support system of family and friends, there are you can connect with other cancer patients. You don't have to go through it alone, and you should not ever.
Right.
You should not ever.
What would you say to the person that responds to you by saying something akin to, well, I don't like being a burden for people?
Well, I don't either. I don't either. And it's about vulnerability, being willing to be open and being vulnerable. And it's not necessarily that you're going to be a burden. We all are burdens, right? I mean, we all have times in our life when we're a burden to our loved ones. And I think what happens is people want to help.
Right.
They really do. People want to step in and help.
Mhm.
And that could just be emotional support, whatever it is. I think in the case of your young friend is, first of all, her age. It's different now for me. And now I'm, 63, turning 64 in 2 days.
Right.
And, so it's a whole different mindset and a whole different thing, because I know that my life's journey is getting shorter anyway. It's a whole other thing because she's in her 30s, right? Yeah. And so that makes it a whole other thing. But I think, honestly, David, to your point, I don't think it might be some of that where they feel like I'm going to be a burden. I think it's more that they just fear their own mortality.
Mm.
I am getting close to death. I may be close to death.
Right.
This is a reason that a lot of people don't go to the doctor. They have a hacking cough that doesn't go away. They have blood in their urine and they ignore it and it doesn't go away. Anything that's not normal that doesn't go away, you got to go check it out.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that if you're afraid to check it out because you're afraid you're going to hear something like you have cancer or you have something else,
Mhm.
it's a lot more fearful to hear that you have cancer at stage 4. So you much rather would hear it that you have it at stage 1.
Right. Yeah.
The whole ignorance is bliss
Oh,
being
yeah.
very bad advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know of some people, I mean, not in a super serious situation, but when something goes bad, it's a typical like, okay, nah, like surely it'll go away. From 2 decades of like living through this and seeing a lot of other people go through this as well, how what would be the first like baby step someone could take to overcome what everyone tells you, ignorance is bliss, oh, this is so nice, just not ignore it, surely it will go away. What will be the small steps someone could take to start overcoming that terrible advice?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, we have to tap into our own resilience and our own courage, I guess I will say, that we all have. Some have more than others, right? There are some people that they become firemen because they're the ones that go running into a flaming building when everyone else is running out. But we all certainly have reservoirs of strength and resilience that we could tap into. And I would just say that ignorance is bliss, to a degree. If there's, depending on what the consequences are, it all comes down to what are the consequences? If you find out, let's say you've got a leaky faucet at your house and you kind of ignore it, well, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, whatever, you have a huge plumbing incident, it's going to cost you some thousands of dollars, but you're still going to be alive and the house will be fine. But you know what? If you fix it early, if you wait and you let that leak continue to drip, now you've got to rip out plumbing and you've got to rip out your flooring and you've got mold and, problems don't get better. No problem gets better, right? In the business world,
Right.
if you're losing market share, it's not going to just magically get better. So no problems get better.
Yeah.
They either kind of go away. When it comes to your health, it's true that some symptoms, if they go away on their own, our immune systems are amazing.
Yeah.
So our immune systems take care of a lot. And so if whatever it is you're experiencing, If it goes away, you have a lump or a bump and it goes away, great. Your immune system took care of it. But anything that doesn't go away, and that certainly if it gets worse,
Right.
and so pushing through the fear, I guess what I would say is this is a case where not knowing, I'd rather know, because also the other thing is it's not necessarily going to be a horrible disease. It could be something relatively benign,
Right.
relatively easy.
Mhm.
And the sooner you take care of it, the easier it will be, the better it will be.
It seems that some of the strength that you've talked about, not only in this situation, but across the board, a lot of this has to do with tapping into a network of people who are going to walk alongside with you. My so I think there's two sides to that. One is the fear of being vulnerable to someone else, right?
Mhm.
And saying, "Hey, I've got this going on." And then the other side is, well, the people that need to come and do that, what's your advice to them as far as how to be a friend to someone that maybe you're suspecting that something's going on and you need to ask some tough questions? How do you approach something like that? Because that's a tough situation, right? I mean, it seems like it would.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, how would you even know? I mean, unless it's somebody like a spouse, significant other, how would you even know?
Well, I think if I saw someone, not me, if you see someone that's losing a lot of weight or
Mhm.
there's something going
Sure, something
physically
visible. Or
going
let's say
on,
like the
right,
cough.
right,
Gosh, Kate, you've been coughing
right,
now, have you checked it out? I mean, that's the very first question. And getting back to your point, David, too, about the baby steps, I think some of it, there's all kinds of obstacles. So, for example, especially if the younger you are, the less chances you may not even have a doctor. You may not even have a relationship with a doctor.
mhm,
So, a baby step might be, okay, I'm going to go to an urgent care center and just say, I've had this bump and it's growing and it's not going away. And I've had it for 3 weeks now,
Yep.
right,
and so start there. And and then in terms of and then it would just be asking questions.
mhm,
Have you checked that out?
mhm,
And I'll go with you. I'll help you find a doctor. I'll go with you to the doctor.
right. Yeah, it seems that the last place that you want to go is online,
Well, oh yes, gosh, Dr. Google, but we all do.
right?
And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if you go to legitimate resourceful resources, you go to a major health institution, Mayo Clinic or that kind of thing. You can get some good information. But let's say you're like, "Oh gosh, I'm losing weight. I haven't been dieting. I haven't been exercising more than usual. Oh my gosh, I'm going to Google and I'm seeing this could be cancer." Well, it could be any number of things. The point
Right.
is ignorance is not bliss in this case.
But it's easy
Ignorance
to
is
catastrophize at
it's
that
easy to
point.
catastrophize,
Yeah,
but this is where knowledge is power. That's what you have to do. You have to replace the ignorance is bliss with
Yep.
the knowledge is power.
yeah, I like that.
So I wanna go back to where we started, which was younger Kate not wanting to do interior design. And I love the advice you telling her of you will find the way. And where I'd kind of like to get some clarification from you on is I've heard you say things like, "Hey, I can do that," right? That's what you learned growing up on a farm. Like you will find the way. But there was also this part of you too that like you were telling your cancer story, like not wanting to do that one thing that seemed like a little bit more risky, but maybe would have been the right thing to do, or um, we start off, you talk about like, yeah, you always need a plan for this. Some of these things almost seem to like contradict each other in different ways. Like you need a plan, but you'll find the way if you just keep going.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering that, if you could talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it probably is contradictory. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would have said to the young Kate, you can do this. And yeah, but yeah, you do need to figure out, okay, how are you going to do this? Okay, so you're worried about money. You're going to, get a job. You're going to find a living situation. You're going to get roommates. You're going to do all those things
Yeah.
to help you maximize your resources. So that is a good point. to have a plan
Mhm.
again. And if the plan could just be sitting out and thinking it out and, 3 bullet points, you're like, okay, this is what I'll do. I'm a bundle of contradictions.
That I think we all are.
I think we all are, exactly.
So you're so talking to young Cate, trying to get into interior design. What are some of the lessons that you've learned going through, these last 20 years that have given you a much higher level perspective on life and what's worth doing, what's really not worth doing, that a lot of people hopefully don't have to get, but you have been?
hmm I think, and I'm thinking watching the Olympics now. So as we're recording this, it's the Summer Olympics, and we were watching last night and watching the men's team, the gymnastics team, and
Right.
it was so great. And
Oh, that guy was awesome.
they were
He's
all
just
awesome. But that
sleeping,
one,
and then all of a
I
sudden he
know.
goes and does it, and then goes back to
I
sleep.
know it's with his glasses. He looks
That
like
is
he's going to the
focus.
library. It's like, who is this computer nerd? And then he's like, oh my gosh, he's the most amazing athlete.
Yeah, save all the energy for one moment,
Yeah,
Right.
all expended.
yeah.
Right.
He was great on
Yeah,
so
he was
many
in the
levels.
zone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it did make me think, and we touched on this a little bit about, so you have a vision. So and I love when they show the stories of these athletes in their young days and, get into it. But how many young kids get into sports? Tons of them.
Right.
And, a lot of them just drop out for whatever reason. You no longer have the passion. And so I think that's part of what I've learned is sometimes you gotta give yourself a break. I think some people it's very easy. I was so envious during the time when I was switching, decided I didn't want to pursue this interior design thing. And I remember I had a friend who was he was going to a different art school, and he wanted to become he knew what he wanted to do. He had always done sketching and things growing up, and he wanted to work for an advertising agency. And he did end up, going to work for an advertising agency, and
Right.
he was very clear about what he wanted to do and how he was going to get there.
Right.
So just having some clarity, but if you don't have that clarity, I think a lot of us don't. We're not really we don't have any strong feelings about something one way or the other.
Right.
I think, I guess what I've learned is, first of all, just give yourself a break. Don't pressure yourself so hard.
Mhm.
And
What does that mean?
I'm very hard on myself. So I, you know, I just everything turns into kind of a battle and well, am I going to do this or not? You're a failure. Those kinds of messages.
Mhm.
You're a failure. I think that's the number one message. Or if you're not an outright failure, you could accomplish so much more.
Mhm.
Those are my two messages. My negative, the ants, the automatic negative thoughts. You're a failure, or you could do so much more.
So when you say you could do so much more,
Well,
and telling yourself that no, you should give yourself a break.
mm-hmm.
Tell me more about, because those two different, very opposite sides.
Yeah. Well, and I'm
I
going.
mean, you're talking to someone who is very much in the like, oh, there's so much stuff you can do. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I think that's a part of it too, is when you have a lot of different interests where you're not so focused on a narrower.
Right. Which is you.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So that adds a little more, makes it a little more challenging. Well, so it's about, for example, with the writing, I've done a little bit of writing now for cancer. I've had a couple of articles published in their publications that are for cancer audiences, people who are
Mhm.
cancer patients or cancer caregivers. And I keep telling, and I got a little website, a little blog going, but I haven't updated it in months. I haven't been doing the work.
Do you want to shout it out really quick?
Yeah, the website is Stage 4 Living.
Stage 4 Living.
And you could get to it either way, either spelling
the
out
number
4,
or you have
either,
both.
yeah, I have both. So either the number 4 or spelling out 4 and .com,
Okay.
stage4living.com. And it's resources. For example, again, resources.
Yes.
Every single cancer has an association,
Mhm.
multiple, and in the case of breast cancer, multiple associations where you can go and get all kinds of resources. You get financial help, you can get emotional support, you can get information on doctors and facilities and just all kinds of great things. So, but I just haven't really done the work, and I was really beating myself up because, oh, I'll find myself sitting down and scrolling, through whatever. And how many of us do that now? I mean, honestly, right? It's kind of endemic among kids that they're just constantly scrolling through TikTok or
Mhm.
whatever. But all of us, we're all stuck in our phones
Yeah.
and we're scrolling through whatever it is we're scrolling through. Uh, and now that I'm dealing with advanced cancer and I just started a sixth treatment plan, and the fact that, when I found out that I had metastatic breast cancer, of course I went to Dr. Google, talking about, going back to that. And the data then, which was in 2016, was that less than 25% of people, mostly women, men do get breast cancer, but it is overwhelmed mostly women,
Mhm.
that less than 25% would survive for 5 years. And so I made the 5 year mark, and
You made the 8-year mark.
and now I'm at 8 years
Yeah.
this year. And so that's a remarkable thing there.
Right.
And but I'm realizing, my road is narrowing.
Yeah.
My options are narrowing, my treatment options are narrowing, and things just become a lot clearer.
Mhm.
So one of the things is, you know what? You're not going to be you don't have to um I I guess I feel like I somehow need to leave my mark on this world, and well, this is part of the mark that I'm leaving,
Right.
right? And that we all leave a mark. We don't, some of us leave a huge mark, right? Good, good or bad.
Right.
Most of us leave marks that we don't even realize we're leaving. Good marks, that the influence that we have on people, we don't even realize it.
I'm curious how you have, I know you as a very positive person. And I know that you have said, I'm not going to spin on this. I'm going to go do something. Right. And I'm curious, what what are those things that keep you going, that make you want to push forward and like, okay, I'm here, but I'm I'm going to keep a positive attitude. I'm going to look for what life has. Even your location, you wanted to be close to the botanical gardens, right? I mean, there was a reason why you moved where you moved.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think those are little choices, but I think this is another lesson that just comes with living. We all have those, if you've heard the expression ants, automatic negative thoughts.
Mm.
We all have them. We all go to our places, our dark places.
Right.
And as I think just that comes with age and experience and knowing that most likely the worst thing that we can imagine won't happen. Or if it happens, you get through it, like cancer. And again, if it gets diagnosed early and treated,
Mhm.
you will be able to put it behind you. Most cancer does not come back, in terms of, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but you're gonna be okay. Knowledge is power. Know it and treat it, and you'll realize just how resilient you are. You'll realize just how much support you have. So you'll get through it. Even if you go to a dark place, it's rarely as dark as it could be. I say that for all of us and anyone that might be watching this. Anyone that's living in the Western world and has any kind of, you don't have to be rich, but you're not poor, right? So
Sure.
if you're generally educated and you have a home and you have food, you have shelter, we really we should get up every morning and just kiss the ground and say thank you. Even if you're not a religious person, whatever your beliefs are, every day the one prayer that we should all be saying is thank you,
Right.
thank you.
Mhm.
And we just don't do that enough, and things could be a lot more dire for most of us.
Right. Talk to the power of um, friends and family and having a network, because you've you have and I have a few friends like this that have so many interests and they're pursuing them all simultaneously. I think of our friend Jim. He's all over the place, right? You've met Jim, um, and I'm curious what you've learned about the power of having that kind of, you mentioned several times, support network. What's that all about?
Hmm. Well, again, I think it's what's that old adage about, you know, happiness shared is doubled and a burden shared is halved. So when you have people in your life that you love and care about, the goodness is even gooder,
Mm-hmm.
and yet the burdens are less.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. But one thing I've also learned for me is I'm okay being by myself, and that's actually, I see that as a blessing. I don't I'm perfectly fine, being by myself too, and it's happening more and more now because my physical capacity is being reduced. I can't I it would be hard for me to do a bike ride on level ground for any distance, let alone
Right.
hills, let alone at elevation.
Mhm.
And so, as my physical capacity diminishes and I can't do those types of physical activities, I've given up skiing, those things that I'm not doing anymore. That's an adjustment. And there's a sadness there. It's a loss,
Sure.
things that
Right.
you love doing.
Right.
But I'm opening more doors to, again, wanting to get back to more writing, getting back to more, sketching, drawing. I want to do collage art, and those are things that I can do. I can
Mhm.
sit, and those are things that I can do, and I can do them by myself. So if I don't have somebody, I'm okay there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really love that, and it could go on a poster or something. But when
What
you
would you
have,
put on the poster?
well, again, it would be when you have the resource, you have people that love you and support you, and you love and support them. It's a two-way street. Is you double your happiness, and you increase your happiness, and you decrease your
Yeah.
burdens.
Mm-hmm. I and I think that's maybe where I'm hoping you can pass along a couple of things there, because there are certain people that don't know how to make friends.
Mm-hmm.
They really, really struggle with that.
Yeah.
They may be in a power situation and they try to force it, and obviously it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's hard for, that's difficult. And, even, yeah, I mean, well, I think the lesson here is, things are not always easy. I think we've come to a point, if you take a look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're, again, if you're in the Western world, if you're American, European, Canadian,
Sure.
you are at the top of the hierarchy, right? You've got, we don't have to worry about what are we going to eat today. We don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, do I have shelter? You know, our basic needs are covered. And so now we're getting to this point of what's going to make us happy, what's going to fulfill us.
Right.
And that's a challenge.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it is we're up at that top level, and civilization has gotten so much better, medicine has gotten so much better, everything, it's just technology. I mean, it's just amazing, and yet we're still not satisfied, and
That's so
because
true.
we have more time to think about the things we don't
We
have,
don't have.
we do a lot more comparison, which is just an evil thing, and
Right.
And it sounds like what you said before is you should just wake up every morning and just say thank you.
Yeah, start there.
Right.
And, anything that you're suffering through, any burden, whether it's disease, whether it's financial issues, whether it's not feeling like you have no friends or struggle making friends, first focus on what you do have, focus on what you bring to the table, focus on what your strengths are, and just get out and see what's out there. It takes some effort. And that's what this thought that I wanted to completed was, I think also that we've come to a point where we expect things to be easy, right? We expect
Right.
kind of things to fall into place. And that's not always the case.
Right.
It's often not the case. Everything worthwhile takes some bit of effort.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I was listening to, pardon me, the most recent interview that Lex Friedman had with the winner of season 6 of Alone. Alone is where they set you out in the middle of nowhere with 10 items of your choosing, and they will come and get you if you are the last one. Otherwise, you can tap out at any time.
Okay.
And there's no camera crew with you. You're taking your own videos. And this particular season, they dropped them off all in the Arctic Circle. So it was really interesting to hear him talk about resilience and how that you wake up every day and you have only yourself to blame. There's no one else to blame there, right?
Mhm.
And you're responsible for your own entertainment and getting things done and planning and how am I going to feed myself and so forth. And I think I understand a lot more what you're saying, that our society has gotten to a point where everything is just easy.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
push a button, I have Uber bring me food or whatever, and
Yep.
I don't have to think about these
yeah,
things. There's
yeah,
no pain that directs my path.
yeah. And I think on the comparison, the issue is that we always compare ourselves to people that have more or appear to have more,
Sure.
and we're lesser than,
Right.
right? We don't have the great, we're not as pretty as, I'm not as pretty as that girl.
Yeah.
I don't have her clothing, or I don't have that person's smarts, or whatever it is,
Right.
whatever point of comparison. Uh, we don't compare ourselves. We always compare ourselves to the people who have more and we have less.
Yeah.
And we forget that, oh my gosh, more than likely, there's people that have much less.
Yeah.
But I think if we, if we did get back to, like, yeah, if we had to deal every day with how am I going to eat, what am I going to eat, things might change. Our perspective, might change.
Right.
But I think it's for any type of and I say this for cancer as well. You really realize how adaptable you are and how much you can put up with. I mean, what ends up happening, so many people have cancer, and or know people who have had cancer. And
Sure.
I was just with some friends on over the weekend, and there was a woman that she was traveling. She was like a friend of one of the friends, and so we were together, and she had colorectal cancer, in fact, and she has to wear they're called an ostomy bag.
Right.
So all of her, you know, um,
Digested food.
yeah, exactly, everything,
Oh,
all,
yeah. Yeah, your
she
colon's
she
gone.
doesn't pee or poop in a toilet.
Right.
It all goes into this bag, and she has to take care of it. And I have another good friend who's in a similar situation, and they adapt and they live, and you would never guess. And I think about if we could all be kinder to each other, if we realized we're so good. I can look at the two of you right now and say, these are two guys that really have everything going on. They have, David, you just bought this great house, and John, you're getting back on your feet after your, issues, and you guys have friends, and you have skills, and you're smart, and you're good looking, and you have all these great things. But I know that both of you have stuff going on underneath the surface.
Sure.
You have turmoil, you have issues, you have problems, and every single one of us does. And if we
Right.
would just look at each other and see a human being that's got stuff going on that we don't even know about. So let's just be kinder to each other.
Mhm. That's great.
The one, so partially personal question. So you mentioned one thing you learned is people want to help.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I've had to combat myself because I know that to be true, but it's really hard to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so hard to ask. Yet almost every single time I have, everyone almost always says yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you could personally talk about your experience with learning that, yes, people like to help. Because, talking about, you want to, see people and get to know them above just the surface, what you see. And it really feels like one of the ways that you basically do that is, you just start by saying, hey, I need help.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what I found, and this goes to about being willing to talk about cancer or whatever else, is you don't even have to ask for help. If you start talking about the situation,
Right.
people will say, "What can I do?" Or if you say, "You know what, I'm going to have this done, or I need to go to the doctor. Well, let me take you." if you just talk about it, you don't even have to ask for help.
Right.
Oftentimes the person will just say, "What can I do?"
Mm.
They'll ask, "What can I do?"
Yeah. Sounds like an attachment to what John was bringing up about people that like to, hide that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds to me like you're saying you're missing a beautiful experience of the changing point for me in learning about why you need to ask for help was not trying to make this about me, but the that changing point was when someone came up to me and said, by the way, you realize when you don't ask for help, you rob that person of joy.
Wow, that's remarkable. Yeah, yeah, and yeah. So yeah, I mean, so I think to ask for help, that just takes a minute. Yeah, I mean, again, it takes digging in because a lot of us, most of us, we don't. We're like, oh, and this is part of that American, independent. I can do it.
Right.
I can
Yeah,
fight
yeah, yeah.
on my
I
own.
have it written down here. I can do that.
Yeah. And I think it is a part of our culture, right?
Yeah.
We're a very individualistic culture, more so than some others. Asking for help means you're lesser than,
Right.
which, is just not true at all.
So I have one last thing, and you can wrap up
Okay.
if you want. But I was thinking about unconventional wisdom, if you will. And, the show's Hard Knocks. So it's all about the things that you learned at the school of Hard Knocks, the things that you're not going to read about in any book. Excuse me, I'm catching your frog in your throat.
Yeah.
Um, and so to wrap up, what may be unconventional or conventional wisdom, what would you pass on to someone that's maybe 20 years from now and somehow they find their way to this podcast, right? And what would you tell those people, and whoever those might be, you might identify who
Mm-hmm.
they might be.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different areas but just kind of hitting on the things we've talked about. From a health perspective, I would say, pay attention to your health. Knowledge, don't approach it as ignorance is bliss. It really is knowledge is power. And the sooner you have the knowledge and you take care of things, the better.
Right.
But also just take care of your health. Take care of your health, people. Exercise, eat well, get sleep, all those things. And then I would say, don't be a we haven't touched on it too much, but the whole concept of mortality and befriending your mortality. You know, we don't talk about death. That is the one thing, death and taxes, right? But death really scares us all, even though it is our inevitable, destination. So to remove the fear of death, and what I like to do, I guess the unconventional business is see your mortality as leverage. All right, I have a limited amount of time. Limited meaning, I mean, it could be decades, but it'll come to an end. And this is it, as far as we know. None of us know what's going to happen in the great after. And so this is it as far as we know. So use your mortality to say, check in with yourself on a regular basis. Is my life going where I want it to be? And how can I course correct if it's not?
Using your mortality as leverage.
I love that.
Tell me a little bit more
I
about
love that.
Again, just knowing that it's only lately, for those of us that dream but don't put the dreams into action, we put things on the back burner. Oh, I'll get to this then. I'll get to this, then. You may or you may not. So knowing that you're going to die, knowing that your body will weaken, even taking care of it, your body will weaken. And how do I manage that? How do I manage that? So leveraging it in the sense that, okay, I have a deadline. Literally, I have a deadline. How, I need to get this done. And whatever matters the most to me, I better get that done.
But at the same time, take a break.
Well, and be easy on yourself for sure, and realize hopefully we all have bucket lists that we won't get to all of them.
Yeah.
Your bucket list should be more things than you can even get to because there's so much.
I had a good friend teach me about deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
He's the same person that always used the term assignment. John, what's my assignment? Right? And what's the deadline?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that, what
Yeah.
you're talking about there.
But it is a balancing act because you also, Vienna waits for you, as Billy Joel says. It's all about a balancing act because some people just push, push, push. So, you got to sometimes you got to let up on the accelerator. Sometimes you got to put on the brake. Sometimes you got to just do nothing,
Mm,
right? It's all a balancing act.
I love that.
yeah.
Well, having come all the way here, what I love to give our guests at the very end is you've got all the cameras, all the audio completely to yourself.
Okay.
What do you want to say? You can promote anything you want. You can talk about anything. If there's something you're like, I just need to get this message out there, that is your reward coming to the very end here. It's all yours.
Well, my message now has really become cancer. I'm kind of retired essentially from other work. So,
I do try to keep giving you work, and
yeah,
you don't want
but I really, it has become a part of my life. And so I would say, and this affects everybody. I think there used to be a commercial. When you have your health, you have everything. You probably don't remember. And I don't even know what the commercial was for.
Right.
Some vitamin or something.
Wasn't a
But
very good commercial, I guess.
Right,
yeah, exactly.
exactly.
Well, it was one of those things where it was a great tagline, but you don't remember the
Right,
product.
right.
So it was, when you have your health, you have everything. And that is so true. So protect your health first and foremost. Secondly, push and realize you have potential and this is it. You're going to die. We don't know what's beyond that. This is all we have. So use that and use your mortality as leverage. But also give yourself some space. Give yourself some space. And yeah, and you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to do it alone. Be willing to be vulnerable, be willing to share. And even if it means you start out and you share with just a few people, you don't have to, again, you don't have to be broadcasting anything, but share, share, share. Yeah, don't rob anyone else of their joy. But I would just say again about, your burdens are going to be much less when you've got someone to help you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
Thank you. This ended up being a lot more enjoyable. I was a little
Well,
nervous.
hold on. I gotta say
Uh-oh.
my last line. All right.
Uh-oh.
All right. And everyone remember, stay curious. See ya.